In February 1978, as a group of city workers dug through one of Mexico City's hard asphalt roads, they stumbled upon something interesting. After digging 2 meters into the earth, the workers struck a large circular stone carving. As they excavated around the enormous stone, they discovered it was carved in ornate and intricate patterns. They immediately contacted archaeologists at the National Institute of History and Anthropology. Soon, the site was teeming with curious archaeologists. As the archaeologists began to excavate the stone carving, they discovered on the surface of the stone disk the image of a woman, naked and decapitated, surrounded by skulls and snakes, wearing a crown made of feathers. This depicted the goddess Coyolxauhqui. Ancient indigenous residents of Mexico City worshipped her. This discovery sparked interest in an ancient city and civilization that had collapsed into the ashes of history. In this Liber-Tea episode, we will soon look into the Aztec civilization's fall. We will try to establish how such a large and sophisticated society vanished beneath the earth. We will also try to establish how life would have been for a person who lived in this great civilization and how it felt to witness the end of their world. Even before the arrival of the conquistadors, the Aztec Empire was loosely held together by strained diplomatic relations, religion, art, and agricultural structures that advanced the empire's ideology. The Aztecs also suffered the unfortunate luck of having predatory neighbors. This meant that their hegemony was always under threat. In 1515 CE, the Aztec Empire suffered a terrible defeat at the hands of their neighbors, the Huixotzingo and the Tlaxcala, and while this did not bring the empire to its knees, it weakened it immensely. Among the empire's hostile neighbors, the Tarascan Empire was its biggest threat. The Tarascans were a constant pain in the empire's flesh. As the second great power in the region, the Tarascans were eager to oust the Aztecs. At the time of their battle for regional hegemony, the Tarascan Empire did not realize that the final solution to the Aztec problem lay thousands of miles across the ocean, and it would also cause their downfall. The Aztecs were not loved in the Yucatan Valley. They ruled conquered city-states with an iron fist, and while many city-states dared not to oppose Tenochtitlan openly, they secretly prayed for its downfall. While most Mesoamerican and South American empires, like the Incas, practiced human sacrifices, the Aztecs did it on another level. The Aztecs made extravagant sacrifices to their gods at the expense of their neighbors. Human sacrifices were conducted differently depending on the celebration. Some festivals even involved cannibalism. While it is impossible to ascertain the full extent of this practice, we cannot downplay the horrors of this practice propagated among the people. Many people may have viewed the sacrifices with a mixture of fear and fascination. Others may have enjoyed the bloodbath. Largely, they demonstrated to the people, especially conquered city-states, the fragility of their lives and the enormous power of the Aztec Empire. Historical records show that the Aztecs regularly attacked their neighbors during the Flower Wars to source sacrificial subjects. The primary purpose of these wars was not to kill, but to capture people for sacrifices. After the wars, the skulls of the sacrificial victims were displayed as grisly trophies around Tenochtitlan. During excavation, archaeologists unearthed numerous mass graves for sacrificial subjects at the bottom of Aztec temples. This lust for blood and warfare was one of the things that contributed to the fall of the Aztec civilization. The Tlaxcalans, for instance, lived a brutal life under Aztec rule. The empire impoverished and starved them continuously, forcing them to participate in the ritual slaughter of their people. This cultivated a fierce hatred toward the Aztecs. Historically, the Aztecs ousted the Tepanecs because they were extremely hated in the valley. Their regime of terror ensured that during the war, no one was willing to be their ally. Those who allied with the Tepanecs were also easily convinced to betray them, and the Aztecs seized this opportunity to end the Tepanic rule. Unfortunately, the circumstances surrounding the downfall of the Tepanics were not instructive to the Aztecs. Later, in a repeat of history, the Aztecs would learn a fearful lesson in diplomacy at the hands of the conquistadors, who outshone them in military might, cruelty, and brutality. In 1502, a mysterious light appeared in the Aztec skyline. For many, it was a bad omen. The Aztec did not know that their destruction would not come from the skies, but rather from the sea. During this time, the empire stretched from the Pacific to the Atlantic Ocean and ruled over 6 million subjects. The newly crowned Emperor MOCTEZUMA II was the richest and most powerful man in the world, as far as he was concerned. On the other side of the ocean, in the Spanish village of Medellin, a 17-year-old young man called Hernando Cortes was growing weary of the monotony of village life. According to the historian Francisco Lopez de Gomora, this monotony made Cortes irritable and unpleasant. Cortes was a member of the Hidalgo class. Members of this social class had noble ancestry, but did not possess any land. There being no inheritance, being a scion of a Hidalgo was not prestigious. Cortes was anxious to rectify his impecunious circumstances. At first, Cortes wanted to go to Italy, as numerous wars were raging there, and the demand for mercenaries was high. However, as he planned to depart, stories about the discoveries of the New World caused him to change his destination. The explorer Amerigo Vespucci had just published the book Mundos Novos, The New World, which was widely supplied. Christopher Columbus's discovery of the New World ignited an exploration frenzy among the Europeans. Stories from the New World described endless opportunities and veritable mountains of gold. In 1504, Cortes set sail for the New World as a notary and clerk. He would come back as an extremely rich man from his violent campaigns against the Aztecs. As we had mentioned earlier, the young Aztec Empire for many years had been glued together by diplomacy and an ever-present threat of violence. The empire was not a homogeneous union of city-states, all of which were committed to its preservation. When the Spaniards began the expedition on America's mainland coast, the enemies of the empire took this opportunity to deal it a deadly blow. The Tlaxcalans and the Tarascans, who deeply hated the Aztecs, became vital allies of the conquistadors. In their pursuit of vengeance and freedom, the rebel city-states did not realize that they were trading one tyrant for an even more evil one, as revolutions are wont to do. When Cortes and his band of treasure seekers and adventurers landed at Tabasco, he was met by hostile natives. The natives were soon neutralized because of the Spaniards' superior weaponry and tactics. In a show of goodwill, the defeated natives gave Cortes several slave girls as a gift. Among them was Mulatins, a Mayan girl. Later, Mulatins played a critical role in the destruction of the Aztec civilization. The slave girl could also speak both Mayan and Nahuatl Aztec. Throughout the campaign, Mulatins accompanied Cortes, and she helped bridge the language gap between the Spaniards and the natives. With the promise of more glory and gold, Cortes and his men ventured to the mainlands toward Tenochtitlan. Initially, the relations between Tenochtitlan and the conquistadors were cordial. However, a few weeks after meeting the emperor, Cortes ordered his kidnapping. He forced the emperor to declare the sovereignty of King Charles V. Cortes also placed a crucifix on the top of Tenochtitlan's temple, Templo Mayor. The commanders of the Aztec military were outraged by the emperor's passivity and ousted him. They named Cuitlahuac the new emperor. At one point, when the conquistadors asked Moctezuma to calm an angry public, he was struck with a stone and later succumbed to his wounds. However, some historical accounts suggest that the conquistadors secretly strangled him as he had outlived his use. Upon the fall of Tenochtitlan's social hierarchy, the other city-states quickly moved to free themselves from Tenochtitlan's tribute system and its draconian practices. The Aztec civilization, slowly but surely, began to decay into the ground. Thank you for listening to this exciting account of the fall of the Aztec Empire, and we hope you have enjoyed this episode. Show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing to the Liber-Tea channel for documentaries about the native people of ancient America. Also, feel free to comment below and let us know any other interesting facts about the fall of the Aztec Empire.